Barry?
Here.
Don Lee? Here. Dr. Oria, you're here on FaceTime? Okay. Okay, proof of notice of meeting?
Proof of notice of meeting was signed front and back page. Everybody should have received by U.S. Postal Service a letter, candid, and that was it. That was the proof of notice.
Dr. Nappy, 959 Southwest Vineyards Boulevard. This is the attorney, right? Ms. Danzo?
Yeah.
And now, you don't represent me, correct?
No.
You don't represent anybody in this room, correct?
Mr. Nappy, we're...
You represent me?
Sir, we're asking you a question.
Time out. We are not going to tolerate this crap in these meetings.
Wait a second.
Time out. We are not starting this meeting now.
This is a point of order. You put out a notice that you sent to this whole community that said this was a board of directors meeting. Please hear me out. Then, on the second page, where the agenda is attached, you call this a board of directors quarterly meeting. And then yesterday,
Let us talk before you called it a special meeting.
You did not give proper
Time out.
notice. So don't shut me down. This is illegal.
There'll be comments at the end of this.
It was going to be a board.
No, there's no comments.
But
You
yes,
have
there is.
the right to speak. This is a point of order and a point of legal matters.
We can shut the meeting down then.
Then shut it down.
But
Then shut it
Do it in
down.
an orderly
You
manner.
have to give proper notice to all residents about what type of meeting this is, and you just called it a special meeting not more than 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, which is less than your 48-hour criteria. That's breaking the law. You said in your pledge, Mr. President, that you would follow things to the letter of the law.
Stop.
Now, it's either by the law or it's not.
You don't have two choices.
I do.
Sit down. We're going to call the meeting.
Call the meeting.
Okay?
Call the meeting and serve everyone properly so that all homeowners have a right to be here. It's not right to exclude anyone.
It was a typo error.
You have
Typos don't count in law.
Argue the point. Stop. You can have your comments at the end of the meeting.
No, I can have my comments now because it's a point of law.
Look, it's obviously you came here with an agenda. And I came here to tolerate. No, I'm not.
It's on an agenda. It's on an agenda.
We have an agenda here. We have two.
You don't have an agenda here. You don't have proper service.
Now, I'm going to give you one more chance.
You don't have proper service.
You either sit down.
That's a point of law.
We'll call the police and get you escorted out of here.
Really?
Yes.
30 minutes on my phone.
Really?
You know, enough is
You're
enough.
going to call the police
Enough
and
is
the shareholder was bringing a point of law to this, and you got a lawyer
You're
here?
disrupting the meeting.
I'm not
We
disrupting
haven't
it
even kicked the meeting off yet.
because you can't have
She was going to get up and make an apology because it was a typo.
Apologies
She
don't serve the whole community. You're excluding me.
Would everybody else accept my apology?
This is not the whole community.
There you go.
You're excluding the whole community. It's 192 homes. This is
Sit
not
down and stop being disruptive.
Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down.
Mary, make a motion to recess for 5 minutes.
I make a motion that we recess for 5 minutes.
I second the motion.
You are not going to get away with this.
You're not going to get away with it.
No, yes I am.
No, you're not.
Yeah?
No, law
I
is
will
law.
not be pushed around like
And I'm not going to be pushed around by you.
Dr. Nappy, one more.
Well, that was a pretty interesting exchange right at the beginning of the meeting. Board President John Palmer has shown this community what happens if a resident stands up for homeowners' rights. There is no place in a so-called premium community for a board member to display such deplorable, crude, and intimidating threats while talking down to any resident. In concert with his board, Mr. Palmer showed that he will stop at nothing to silence the truth. Secretary Linda Victor misrepresented the proof of notice by saying all residents received notice. How could that be when the board scotch taped the word special meeting to the sign at the front gate the night before the meeting? Why would Mr. Palmer think he can get away with circumventing statutes? And why would Mr. Palmer and his board attorney threaten to have a resident bodily removed by police while trying to warn them of improper service? Why did no one on the board have enough sensitivity to reschedule a meeting that was also in direct conflict with one of the highest holy Jewish holidays, Rosh Hashanah? Why were they so angry right out of the stall, even before the resident could speak on a point of order? Why would the president of a board incite such mob-like reactions from the other residents comprised mostly of their friends against another resident? None of what we just witnessed is professional or acceptable in a premium community. Let this be a reminder of what all residents will be met with if they want to stand up for their right. Even their lawyer, who the residents pay for, but who does not represent any homeowner, and only the 5 that sit on the board, is a tool to attempt to intimidate residents. Why would a community need an attorney present for a meeting and make residents pay for his time? Why would an attorney that should know residents have a right to speak on any agenda topic for a minimum of 3 minutes support the board in restricting residents' right to speak? Well, let's get back to the meeting and see if the recess conference did any good at all.
I make a motion to call this meeting back to order.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
All in favor? Okay. Now, we talked about the proof of notice meeting. Linda, you were going to say something before this meeting broke up about the typo.
None of us noticed the typo on the top page of the agenda. The quarterly meeting is as noticed on the bulletin board next Saturday, October 4th. This is a special meeting which you all received a letter about, and it too is noticed on the bulletin board. And the quarterly meeting was put on the calendar last January. So I apologize for that typo. And it wasn't noticed until last night.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, what's going on in the new business? First item on the agenda was the reserve study. The fellow that was deeply involved in the reserve study was John Picker. He worked closely with the engineers. John, where are you?
Yeah, right here. I gave a lengthy discussion on the reserve study, why HOAs have it and everything. We're not going to do that again. Board got it, board reviewed it. The study recommended that the reserve portion of the HOA dues be raised. Right now, everyone pays $207 a month in their dues. $60 basically is cable, $69 lawn service, $17, I think 85 cents goes to the reserve presently. They want to add an additional $8.52 per month per resident for the reserves. Reserves for things like long-term road repair, things like that. They also say that each year you should revisit it and add 1.2% for inflation. I recommend, after doing the numbers, you go to $9 a month rather than $8.52 a month, and that should carry you for 5 years before you have another reserve study. And if you go to $10 a month per person, per household, that should hold you off 7 to 8 years. And they recommend a reserve study every 7 or 8 years. So you also have to convert your restricted reserve funding to pool reserves. So you have to put reserve money now into general reserves and don't put any more money into walls and gates or clubhouse, because those items right now are mostly overfunded.
And this is recommended by
Reserve advisors.
And they are who?
They are a
I think
reserve.
everybody needs to know who they are.
They're a reserve study group out of
Tampa?
no, they're off in Tampa. Their main headquarters is in Michigan, Minnesota. But they have real engineers. The person, the head engineer who came down here was she had 2 engineering degrees. Very good. The report was very thorough. It was available at Pinnacle.
Correct.
Some people read it, some people didn't.
Right.
They're the experts. All the other HOA do it. Time we did it. This is the first study.
Once again, Linda Victor, board secretary, and the board show their insensitivity by moving up the quarterly board meeting to October 4th, which falls on Yom Kippur, the highest holy day of the year for those of Jewish faith. John Victor, whom President Palmer claims had in-depth dealings with the engineering firm, didn't even know that the firm was out of Wisconsin, not Michigan or Minnesota. The firm only has one certified engineer in Florida, and that engineer did not come onto site for an inspection. Mr. Victor also said, in concert with Mr. Palmer, that the engineering firm recommended pooling our funds. This is a misrepresentation. The firm did not recommend pooling funds, but recommended the cash flow method. The other suggestions were made per the request of the board to pool the money. The firm also said that a vote of 75% of homeowners was needed to approve it, but then goes on to cite how to circumvent this, which the board intends to do. In short, what this means is if the board uses the pooling method, once those funds are expended, they will be able to spend your money freely in the future without any consent of the residents. The big question of all time is why Secretary Linda Victor and the board reappointed her husband, John Victor, past board treasurer, to a committee position empowering him to make recommendations on spending your money, when in July of 2013, he, in concert with 4 other board members, abandoned their fiduciary responsibility without notice and quit, throwing this whole community into jeopardy of potential state receivership and costing your community tens of thousands of dollars in legal expenses. If this does not reek of nepotism and cronyism, nothing does. Additionally, why does Mr. Victor, past president, board members, and committee members have free access to a clubhouse you pay for and no other resident has access to but still is expected to pay for? Now let's head back to the meeting and see what else happens.
Okay, what I'm going to do is, I know a lot of the people don't understand it or don't want it. I mean, don't know what this entails. So I'm going to allow anybody right now, that wants to speak or ask questions, come regarding the research study. We're going to give each individual 3 minutes. 3 minutes to make a comment about the research study. If we can answer the question, John, I'm sure will answer.
Okay. John or John?
They voted earlier, too. Were there any imminent findings, something we had to do right away? They looked at Classical Court in the front entrance and the water seepage, and they said that probably within 2 years we should be budgeting to do something. Since then, we had another engineering group come in, we had the city come in. We're still getting expert opinions on how to address that issue.
Thank you. John Bradfield, 933. John, when you say that we're not going to put any more money into the restricted, is that correct?
That is correct. That is what the recommendation says. That's what our accountant says. That's what our attorney recommended. The new concept now is using pooled reserves. by having a pool of money, you can draw for whatever interest. They gave us a spreadsheet going out 30 years, showing us what to do. If you tried to fund each individual item, like perhaps paving, and you ran into an issue, you couldn't take money from walls, or money from the clubhouse, or money from any other place. And because if you stick with restricted reserve accounts, that means you have to fund a greater amount. They gave the difference in the report that if you didn't use pool reserves, it was something like a 22% further increase. But the new concept, 720 permits it, pool reserves.
720 specified specific restricted accounts.
Every we've talked to, has gone,
Well, I'm not saying eliminate them all, but I mean, the real big one, of course, is the roads. And that one should stay restricted so that we're not going to be taking money out and leaving us with $60,000 for $1 million job in here. Now, I'm all for pooled reserves to a limit, but when we start pulling this money out away from our roads and our major expenses, like what we're going to do out front, and keep it going, and particularly our drainage system and everything else, there are 2 or 3 items that should remain restricted and be funded that way, so that there is no way that the board can get at that money except for that project.
the monies that are in restricted
Thank you.
reserve, that are in restricted reserve today, John, correct me if I'm wrong, will remain there, correct?
That is correct.
Any additional
Actually, that
reserves
should,
will now go to general. But anything that's restricted, that's in restricted today will remain in that account. We
I
can't.
understand. As I understand it, we're not going to put any more money into the restricted accounts, any of them.
We're gonna pool it.
you're going to put it in general reserves. You have a general reserve. Your
Okay.
categories are road, clubhouse, pool, general, privacy wall, game.
Okay, I wish to register my disapproval of that. I think we should have, particularly the roads and anything else that runs over $100,000 should have the funds in there until such time as we have the reserve.
John?
2 or 3 accounts, and that's it.
If I could clarify that further before the next person. By having pool reserves, you have a fund.
I understand
And you
that.
draw from the fund as each individual item comes, and your balance, right now you have
I understand.
260, it goes up and down.
I
It's all
understand that, John.
documented in the report by people a lot smarter than me.
Well, the scenario would be.
I understand
if
that,
you
but I
don't-
also understand why it was put in 720 to begin with. And that's to prevent people like yourselves with very minor experience in these kind of
That was in
things. Grabbing
720
the
for
funds.
years and years. Now they adjusted 720 to permit HOAs to do exactly what, to fund it more economically.
Because you run the risk if you
All right.
run with,
All right, I'm just saying,
if you
All right, we've
not,
gone over this.
Okay.
Okay, we've heard you. We understand.
okay, fine, that's all I wanted to say.
And yourself.
Hi, Ellen Hale, 911. I have 2 questions, because I could see where an increase where it's required, and is there a way to take that $9 and to put the $9 in the pool, and to keep what was allotted to the particular line items continued to be funded, but the $9 that you're asking for a month, which is $27, that money in fact would go into a pooled account. That's one statement. My other statement, that I'm perplexed. A year ago, there was a statement that came out by Mr. Bannock when he was president.
Does this have to do with the reserve study?
Yes, it does. Because a year ago, when you were treasurer, Mr. Bannock was president, and he put a letter out, and he said to all of us that the current, and he was in charge of the last study, by the way, and the last transition, and he put out a letter, which I have a copy, that said that our reserves are more than ample for the future. That's how he said. We are fully funded for the future.
Ellen,
So I want to know what happened in
Ellen,
12 months.
Ellen, you're going
That's
down
all.
the road. I told you we're not going to go down. I don't care what happened before November, not November of 2013. That's history. We did a new reserve study, we have it, it's documented by a reputable, reliable firm. And a bunch of engineers that know what they're talking about. They know the rules, they know the regulations, they know the statutes, this is what they're recommending. There's nobody in this room that's smart enough to challenge that document. Nobody.
I beg your pardon, I ran a $110 million company.
You know, your time is out, and you know.
Mr. Victor claims that both him and the board have reached out to other experts, but has anyone ever heard of any other experts being solicited? There were 2 bids for the reserve study, and the other bid was half of what this firm's fee was. As another resident tries to clarify and object to the pooling of your funds, the board and Mr. Victor had a very difficult time explaining their logic. Then, as another resident tries to express concerns and pointed out that just a year ago, Mr. Vanek, past president, and Mr. Victor, past treasurer, who both in concert abandoned their fiduciary responsibilities without notice, claimed to the entire community that we were more than funded for the future. So why can't they tell the community what happened to your money in less than a year? To add insult to injury, Mr. Palmer tells the residents that he does not care what happened leading up to this. Additionally, Mr. Palmer once again shows his contempt for residents and insults all residents by telling them that no one in that room is smart enough to understand this study. Of course, Mr. Palmer and the board refused to acknowledge that there was a resident in the back of the room that was a certified engineer, a civil engineer, and completely understood the reserve study and had serious concerns regarding the representations of the report. But as you will see in the next clip, once again, Mr. Palmer did not want this resident to speak on the matter, nor did they at any time reach out to him to consult pro bono. Instead, they relied on a past treasurer with no experience who abandoned this community once before. President Palmer says no one is smart enough to understand and trust them. But how can you trust those that misrepresent the study and say over and over again that the Reserve Association recommends pooling when in actuality the reserve advisors did not, and emphasized their recommended cash flow method and only provided information on pooling of funds at the request of the board, along with the HOA request costing homeowners an additional $2,644, and completely taking away your rights to even vote on how it is spent at all? Why should any resident take the word of a board that clearly does not understand the reserve study and a past board member, Mr. Victor, that just misrepresented the explanation of the study? Perhaps it is the board and appointed committees that are the only ones who do not understand the study, but purposely skewed explanations to have their way without any consideration of the residents now or going forward. Well, back to the meeting, and let's see what happens next.
There's nobody in this room that's smart enough to challenge that document. Nobody.
I beg your pardon, I ran a $110 million company.
You know, your time is out, and no interference.
That was only my 2 questions.
Now, as far as the restricted reserves today, they're going to remain in that account. The $9 that we're going to increase is going to go into a general.
That would be fine.
That's what we're going to do.
Right, but not all of our reserves go into a general. Like
What's restricted today remains there.
And it remains funded as is.
No, Ellen, what the study proposed was use a pool reserve for the future. And actually, what it also said was you should probably get rid of all the restricted things so you have one general reserve pool.
Well, then
I know everybody's thinking, oh, now it's just this one big pot that people need. You follow the guidelines here. Ellen, this is the funding, the green, this jagged line is the balance. And you make a major expenditure, you're going to drop down close to zero. Then you build it back up, and then bang, you get hit with the roads. They're recommending around 2040.
I agree with. I agree with this.
Can I say something? Let me give you an example.
Anybody else?
In another property that I have, we were doing the roads this summer, to the tune of almost $200,000. We have all the money in that road reserve. Well, when we started to get into the nitty-gritty, we found drainage issues to the tune of almost $80,000. Well, we had the money for the road, but we have nowhere to pay for the drainage issues. Everything is a line item. We can't pay for the drainage, we can't do the roads. So now we have to start over and fund a pool so we can have generated enough money to fix the drainage so we can fix the road. It'll be 2 more years.
You could always do a special assessment for that.
Why would we want to do that?
You wouldn't, but I'm just saying that.
Anybody else? Any questions?
Does this pool include money to be used for legal fees?
Legal fees, huh?
What is that? What is that?
What does that have to do with reserve study?
Well, you're talking about pooling the money.
Did you read the reserve study?
Yes, I did.
I know you did. Did you see legal fees in it? Did you see it in it? I know you
You're
did.
talking now about
And
pooling.
answer my question. Did you see legal fees in that reserve study?
No, I didn't.
Okay, then why are you asking that question?
I'm relating
No,
the pooling
you
of
are
the
not
money.
relating to anything.
If you want to keep this civil, you talk to me in a civil tone, and I'll talk to you in a civil tone. You got that?
You know,
You treat me like a human being, I'll treat you like a human being. You disrespect me, I show you no respect.
fine. The
You
answer is
understand that?
no, it has nothing to do with legal fees.
Thank you.
All right?
Thank you.
Anybody else?
You also said you're state for the grand reserve, so I'm brand new to it. But could you just say this in simple terms? So if all our news dues will go into a general reserve fund, right?
Right.
That fund would be operated by the board and the money would be allotted to whatever project needs to be done at any given time.
That's correct.
Will all the new money go into that fund? Will all the dues go into that fund from now on?
No.
Just a part of it.
That's correct. And it's a very small portion.
Okay.
You know?
No,
You said the numbers were contributing what today?
$50 and some cents, I believe.
Increase by $9.
You said 1785.
Yeah.
$15.13 per month of your dues.
Goes into reserve.
I think it's a smart idea to give value way to supplement whatever needs to be supplemented.
And don't forget, the reserves are separate to the operating fund.
I understand that.
Legal fees, everything else come out of operating. Reserves are for, not for maintenance, for capital expenditures.
Right. Right. Any other questions?
Dave Martin, 960 Southwest. According to the reserve study that was done with irrigation, that was one of the things that was on it. As I requested by the one controller box was removed from my home, I'd like to know what's being done with it now.
Nothing. We removed it from your home.
I understand, but you know, you've got a lot of community property back there. If you let it die, you're going to have to replace that.
That's not an agenda item, David, you know that.
Of course it is, it's part of the reserve study.
It's part of the reserve.
Irrigation is reserve study, you have to fund that stuff.
Actually, we decided we're just not going to irrigate back there.
You have to irrigate, you have a contract with
A
Helen.
large portion, you know, of it has never been irrigated to begin with. Okay? On the left-hand side.
I'm glad to hear you.
It's never
made
been
that decision.
irrigated before. And now that the palms that are in there are now grown, we've been told by experts that you don't have to irrigate them anymore. So why waste the money?
Well, I'm glad it's a point of record then that you made that, because if anything dies back there, then you're responsible for that.
No, we're not.
Really?
That's it.
Explain that, please. Your attorney just shut you down. I'd like to hear the explanation.
No, I'm going to tell you now. That has nothing to do with this agenda. That's it.
Reserve study irrigation has nothing to do with
That has nothing to do with the back of your property.
It's not my property.
All right, anybody else have another question?
Excuse me. I think there's people here that.
No, you're out of line, because it has nothing to do with the agenda.
Well, what
Nothing at all. This agenda is to vote whether we're going to vote on increasing the reserves or not, and whether putting them to restricted or general. That's all it is. That's all this meeting is. That's the
You were
agenda.
talking about the reserve study, which included irrigation, which was a significant portion of that. It was over $20,000 over the period of time that it was, to include $2,600 that was allocated for this year.
Okay.
So, yeah, you made my point. I appreciate it.
You should review the contract with Heatherwood, which obligates us to maintain
Mr. Manning,
the
you weren't
irrigation.
asked to speak. You had your 3 minutes. Your 3 minutes is done.
That man happens to be a civil engineer. I think he knows his stuff.
Okay, democracy. Anybody else? All right. Now, you all heard, what the recommendations are from the company. It's obvious, that in 10 years, we have not increased a dime, into the reserve study or the HOA dues. And they're telling us that, we could be in trouble if we don't take action now.
Well, as you can see once again, the contempt Mr. Palmer and the board have for a resident that was a certified civil engineer trying to voice his concerns regarding the representations made by the board concerning the reserve study, and more specifically, the drainage issues in Classico Court. Not only did the board not want to hear anything he had to say, but told everyone that what the resident was trying to discuss had nothing to do with the reserve study. Nothing to do with the reserve study? It has all to do with the reserve study. In fact, this study, they tout, mostly covers resurfacing, but it does not include the unearthing of the pavement, which would reveal no sewer or drainage under the pavement that would be needed to take away the water. In this event, no matter what they tell you at this meeting, once this project begins, you can expect a financial surprise when you all find out after the fact that it will cost another 20 to 30% to correct. But trust them and their uneducated opinion above a civil engineer. Okay, so now let's get back to the meeting where the board tries to push through even more rules and regulations that members of the Rules and Regulation Committee never saw until this meeting. So who did write these new rules? Notice how in these new rules they even try to deny your constitutional rights to exercise the right to appeal and due process. Let's get back to the film now.
So, Linda, Mary?
Well, do we want to talk about, John said 3 months. We need to discuss the 9.
Well, my recommendation is, I don't think we should go to 10. I think we should stick with the 9. It covers us for 5 years. We don't have to increase it every 1.255% a year for the next 5 years. So that's my recommendation.
So I make a motion that we change all future funding to the reserves from the restricted to having a general pool with recommendation from the study and from what John is telling us. So I make that recommendation that we go from restricted to having a general pool.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye. All in favor, Dr. Oswald? So we're on to the next one.
And so now I make a motion that we make the increase $9 a month, for that new general pool funding for reserves.
I'll second that motion. Should we have an effective date on that motion?
Yeah. Probably January. It should be beginning of 2015.
So I make a motion that starting January 1st, we change, we increase the amount going into the general pool fund for reserves, an additional $9 monthly.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All in favor?
John, can I ask you one question? I still didn't understand this part of it. Is that we're not going to increase our dues, but we're going to increase the reserve by $9 a month. Is that correct? I'm sorry?
You're increasing the dues, John, the reserve component of them.
This is not a budget.
Your quarterly
We're talking
dues are
about
going-
the reserve study. This is a budget. This is not a budget. Okay?
Okay, so, I
The
don't,
annual meeting.
please, then is this a correct statement? That starting the first of the year, there is going to be $9 a month more put into the reserve account, is that
That is
correct?
correct.
You're gonna
That
pay.
is-
And that's all?
That is correct.
Thank you.
No,
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 because
that's
they're going
not,
to say, where's
that's,
it coming from?
that's not
It's going to
correct.
come from an
John,
increase.
what they said was, now, by increasing reserve component, your quarterly dues are going to go up from $623 to...
You didn't say that in there.
No, he didn't say that. At this point, wait a minute, this meeting was not
$17
noticed.
to $13 that we paid today is going to increase.
Okay, John, am I understanding now that we have turned this meeting into a budget? Not a budget, but an increase in our funds, our fees? We have turned that into that?
The reserve portion of your fees.
But we didn't say that in the notice. Our notice didn't say we were going to consider increasing our fees. It doesn't say that. Now you're doing it? It wasn't in there, then.
You have to be, you have to.
People don't know that. I didn't know it until just now. Your notice didn't tell us that we were considering increasing our fees.
We don't know if we are or not.
John,
We didn't do the budget.
so we let John maybe finish, I think he was elaborating further, I didn't hear him finish, he was finished.
I think the point is that instead of
John.
before you can vote on an assessment, no, my name's Rick. Before you can vote on an assessment, you have to put that into the document that's sent out to all of the
John, go ahead.
residents,
Go ahead.
which it did not have.
John, go ahead.
Well, why don't I address their concerns that they're trying to say, because you didn't notice this as a budget meeting, they're trying to say you can't do anything. I think you still can, and if you want to hold off that till when you have your budget meeting,
Which we plan to do.
and then,
We know what the vote is.
That's what you're going to have to do.
so just reiterate what you did, but basically, I think the people here understand, big deal. You're gonna pay $9 more because you've been carried for 10 years, costs are going up eventually. They say 2040. You're gonna probably have to repay this, about $300,000.
All we're doing is accepting the recommendation of the reserve study at this meeting right now. We have to do that before we do anything else. So
we're not
this isn't a budget meeting. The budget meeting will come down the road, and then we'll decide where that money is coming from. Right now, we are accepting the recommendation of the reserve study. We're putting $9 more in the reserve. Where it comes from?
Not yet until it's approved in a budget meeting.
John, it will be done in January of 2015.
It can't until the homeowners association approves it.
Okay, just let's move on.
John, the homeowner association doesn't approve the budget before.
Yes.
The board does. The
You
board.
want to
All right,
read?
time out, time out. Come on, let's get time out. Okay, you have your time. Okay?
Never mind. Yeah.
All right? Now, the next item on the agenda is the rules and regulations. We have taken feedback, from a lot of people in the community. Number one, in particular, was the storm doors, the front doors. People have trouble with the doors, they recommended maybe we look at something different to be able to give them. They talked to the art committee, they talked to the board. I spent some time with the art committee. The art committee has made some recommendations to the board, and the same thing with panels. I mean, for 10 years, we have not made any changes to anything we do in the community. We thought that, let's give the people something more that they could do, if they wanted to. But keep it within the theme of the vineyards, in the Mediterranean fashion. And this is what we strive to do, working together with Corky and his team, talking to the individual board members. And we think we came up with a happy medium. I think we're glad to present it to everybody and vote on it. This is what we think we should do. And I'm not ready for comment, so stop that.
I'm on the Rules Committee, and I thought that was what the Rules Committee was
The
for.
Rules Committee was not for that.
I understand, but
You
the
got
Rules
your,
Committee was
you
to
got
change
your
the rules.
big profit, didn't you? Which I saw. So that's the end of that conversation. So, we thought that we would try to do the best for the community. Give the people more options from what they have today. Again, just keep it within the theme of the vineyards. Okay? So, we sent out.
Mr. Palmer, as president, should not be making recommendations for board voting and leave that to the board. In addition to this, the board then disregards homeowner concerns and makes motions to approve and votes to adopt the reserve and obligate you to pay more money, even though the board cannot answer the homeowners regarding where the money would be coming from. This threw the homeowners into a confusing dilemma, and this meeting did not provide the proper notices for increased fees. Then Mr. Victor and the board once again tries to spin further confusion at homeowners. Whenever anyone that is not part of the board's group of 20-some people tries to raise legal matters, they are further excluded in the decision and discussion process and shut down. Now, when the board gets to the new rules and regulations, listen very carefully in the next clip, and you might even hear Mr. Palmer confess to speaking with Secretary Linda Victor about the new rules and regulations, and then saying he also spoke with Barry Parker, board director, about the same rules and regulations topic. Now, this would constitute 3 board members discussing in private matters that place them in direct conflict and violation of the Florida Sunshine Act, which prohibits board members from forming a quorum and discussing matters that should only be discussed in an open meeting. 3 board members makes a quorum and is a violation. This is clearly what happened, or how could they have knowledge of these new rules and be prepared to make motions, vote, and pass it without prior knowledge? In addition, 720 statutes prohibits an HOA from creating further restrictions and restricting rules and regulations beyond the rules and regulations established in our original covenants. But they do all this anyway because their agenda has nothing to do with homeowner input. You did hear the board just make motions, vote, and pass an increase in dues as of January 2015. Mr. Palmer and the board also said this is what they decided to do, and that's that. When a resident tries to tell them that they could not do that, and Mr. Palmer said this meeting was not a budget meeting, how could they pass a motion that will affect your budget? Then Mr. Palmer, once again, in his dictatorial, confrontational, and condescending style, reprimanded the resident and told him that that's the end of that conversation. Mr. President, Mr. Palmer is nothing short of volatile and not reflective of a premium community. I don't see how this meeting can get any worse, but let's get back to it and see if there's any more contempt toward homeowners from this board, headed by what appears to be King Palmer and Queen Victor. By the way, isn't it also disturbing to know that the appointed, not elected, Vice President Dr. Oria never seems to be available for most of these meetings, or maybe he resides only in a cell phone? Well, let's get back to the meeting right now.
This is a budget. This is not a budget. Okay?
Okay, so, I don't, please, then is this a correct statement? That starting the first of the year, there is going to be $9 a month more put into the reserve account, is that correct?
Correct.
And that's all?
That is correct.
Thank you.
No, because they're going to say, where's it coming from?
That's not
It's going to
correct.
come from an
John,
increase.
what they said was, now, by increasing reserve component, your quarterly dues are going to go up from $623 to
You didn't say that in there.
No, he didn't say that. At this point, wait a minute. This meeting was not
$17
noticed.
to $13 that you pay today is going to increase.
Okay, John, am I understanding now that we have turned this meeting into a budget? I mean, not a budget, but an increase in our funds, our fees? We have turned that into that?
The reserve portion of your fees.
But we didn't say that in the notice. Our notice didn't say we were going to consider increasing our fees. It doesn't say that. Now you're doing it? It wasn't in there.
You have to be,
People don't know that. I didn't know it until just now. Your notice didn't tell us that we were considering increasing our fees.
We don't know if we are or not.
John,
We didn't do the budget.
so we let John maybe finish, but he was elaborating further. I need to hear him finish. He won't use it.
I think the point is that instead of before you vote on an assessment, no, my name's Rick. Before you can vote on an assessment, you have to put that into the document that's sent out to all of the
John, go ahead.
residents,
Go ahead.
which it did not have.
John, go ahead.
Well, why don't I address their concerns that they're trying to say, because you didn't notice this as a budget meeting, they're trying to say you can't do anything. I think you still can, and if you want to hold off that till when you have your budget meeting,
Which we plan to do.
and then,
We know what we're voting
That's what
on.
you're going to have to do.
so just reiterate what you did, but basically, I think the people here understand, big deal. You're gonna pay $9 more because you've been carried for 10 years, costs are going up eventually. They say 2040. You're gonna probably have to repay this, about $300,000.
All we're doing is accepting the recommendation of the reserve study at this meeting right now. We have to do that before we do anything else. So this isn't a budget meeting. Budget meeting will come down the road, and then we'll decide where that money's coming from. Right now, we are accepting the recommendation of the reserve study. We're putting $9 more in the reserve. So where it comes from?
Not yet until it's approved in a budget meeting.
John, it will be done in January of 2015.
It can't until the homeowners association approves it.
Okay, just let's move on.
John, the homeowner association doesn't approve the budget.
Yes,
The whole board does. The
You
board.
want to
All
read?
right, time out. Come on, let's get time out. Okay, you have your time. Okay?
Never mind.
All right? Now, the next item on the agenda is the rules and regulations. We have taken feedback, from a lot of people in the community. Number one, in particular, was the storm doors, the front doors. People have trouble with the doors, they recommended maybe we look at something different to be able to give them. They talked to the art committee, they talked to the board. I spent some time with the art committee. The art committee has made some recommendations to the board, and the same thing with him. I mean, for 10 years we have not made any changes to anything we do in the community. We thought that, let's give the people something more that they could do, if they want to, but keep it within the theme of the vineyards. In the Mediterranean fashion. And this is what we strive to do, working together with Corky and his team, talking to the individual board members. And we think we came up with a happy meeting. I think we're glad to present it to everybody and vote on it. This is what we think we should do. And I'm not ready for comment. So stop that.
I'm on the Rules Committee, and I thought that was what the Rules Committee was
The
for.
meeting was not for that.
I understand, but the Rules Committee was to change the rules.
Didn't you? Which I saw. So that's the end of that conversation. So, we thought that we would try to do the best for the community. Give the people more options from what they have today. Again, just keep it within the theme of the vineyards. Okay? So, we sent out the copy of the new rules and regulations, and we got some feedback. A lot of it positive, but there were a few people that, said that maybe we should reconsider, the amount of colors that we're introducing into the community. I talked to Linda, I talked to, Barry, separately, by the way, so we didn't have a separate meeting. And we all kind of agreed that, yeah, okay, maybe we just kind of push the envelope a little bit too far. So, what we are going to do is, I'm probably out of line here, but we're going to cut 2 of the colors, from the new rules and regulations. Which means we're going to have to rewrite the rules and regs to eliminate the 2. But what we're going to eliminate is the sawdust and the herbal wash.
What?
These 2 colors, the sawdust and herbal wash that we had added into the rules.
What colors are they?
They're green.
They were kind of,
They're green, yeah. Okay, because the names of the colors don't really...
they don't.
I just want to say, green would have been way out of line for Mediterranean style.
You're not alone in that sense.
I don't know about sawdust, but green would have been way...
They're both.
I have seen lots of Mediterranean homes in Spain, Italy, Greece. I have seen orange, but I've never seen green. That's right.
It's green tint, it's not...
Yeah, I believe it. I just don't think it's appropriate.
Anyway, we decided
to eliminate it.
we decided to cut it off. All right?
Do I still do my pink door?
Can we put pink in?
So,
And I guess that there was
Okay, I'm going to make a motion.
Wait, one more second. Just 1 second.
I would just suggest that maybe you go back to the drawing board with the rules and regulations. 1, 720 prohibits further restriction with rules and regulations from our original covenants. So that's already been pushed way beyond. Secondly, in 3.1 application process, it says here there is no appeal of the ARC decisions. If you do that, you're going to open up this whole community to a plethora of lawsuits externally because you're not giving them any venue. You are violating their U.S. constitutional right, which you just pledged to allegiance to this flag, for the right to due process and appeal.
all right.
That's the law.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay,
No, you've had your turn.
No, John, this is on these. I'm not going to accept being cut out on this. We have a situation, I'm on the Rules Committee, and Vince Crawford and I have had long arguments about this. There are rules in here, specifically one that deals with the garbage cans.
Are we talking about?
No, we are talking about the rules going against the use restrictions. A further use restriction was added. That's an example of it, to where they have added restrictions that are not contained in the use restrictions via a rule. Now, those have to be scrutinized by Mr. Jacob here, or Mr. Enser, or some other legal eagle that can do it, and say, these rules have gone beyond what they can do. And this has been something for 7 years. When these first came out, I brought this out. And I have fought it. Mr. Morgenstern can tell you, I've been fighting it from day one. We started this thing with a one-page rules, and then all of a sudden we find out that 7 months later, we come out with 32 pages of them, and most of them that are in there are either, one, an extension of city and county ordinances, or a modification of our use restrictions. And what I'm saying is that these need to be identified, gone back and looked at, and say, hey, the rules to begin with were private unit development. If you go into our bylaws and you go into our articles of incorporation, it says the board is to maintain and to administer the common area. It has gone beyond that. There are features in there for the architectural standards and guidelines. The same thing with landscaping, standards and guidelines. We don't have those identified. They've been stuck in there as changes in landscaping. But if you go into these things, you'll find that it's there. And this whole process has been caused by the people that made out the original rules and regulations being from condominiums. And they don't understand the difference between a condominium and a private unit development, which we are.
All right.
That's it.
I'll keep it short. Okay, John, I'll keep it real short because I just want to support one thing that I want you to revisit, and that in fact is the due process. Because things change with the state so much, that the state is changing, Florida-friendly landscaping, you can have this, you could have a compost, you could have that. An ordinary person, when they're sitting on an art committee, possibly they don't have all the information that's current with state laws. Because of that, there should be available an appeals process to be able to bring that new information forward if in fact it has a bearing on the rulings of the art committee. That's all we're asking. So when you're revisiting it,
when you say we, or whatever, tell me who you're talking about.
the citizen of the United States.
Is it you 10? Is it the whole room? I don't know.
I'll tell you who it is. As a United States citizen, you are allowed due process by law.
Of course.
That's all this is.
We're all neighbors.
Correct.
We should be friendly, get together, agree with each other, and disagree in public.
Absolutely, but there should be an appeal process. That's all. I'm saying they're taking due process out of this appeal process. That's all I'm asking. I'm not challenging any of the ARC's rulings. I'm saying
here is people have been offending each other, offending the board, insulting the board, and when you walk in that room, they carry that baggage. And they're not allowed to get out of hand anymore, and we're fed up with it.
Who walks into this room and carries that bag?
All right, that's it.
It's just a recommendation. It's only a recommendation.
She does. You make it adversarial when we're trying to be helpful. You're making it adversarial. We don't make the rules. We're one line of
Hello, everybody. I don't really understand because I'm going to be honest, I really didn't read everything. So when they start talking, it kind of goes over my head. But I just have one simple question. Is it correct or incorrect that, let's say, the Architectural Review Committee says you can't make a change? I was told, this is a couple years ago, that if you got 75% of the signatures, then you can make that change. Is this no longer in existence?
That's the covenants.
Okay. But is it,
We're not talking about the covenants.
okay,
We're
so
talking
that's
about rules and regulations.
yes or no?
No. Are you
If
saying?
I wanted to put up a gate and you said no, but I went around with a petition and I got 75% of
That was never in the covenants or the rules of regs. You would never be allowed to do that. If the art committee said, if you wanted a gate, and the art committee said no, it would mean no. And you were never allowed to go around and get 75%.
Oh, because my father said somebody told him 2 years ago that 75% of the
I think what you're referring to.
That's all I wanted to know. I'm sorry. Continue.
Anybody else? Yes.
I didn't invite you.
No.
Just one comment. 3.1, I tend to agree with it. There should be some type of appeal. If our committee doesn't like something we like, we should be able to come to the board or somebody else and rediscuss that as a good neighbors and maybe bring a different point, different view to it.
Yeah.
Second, quick comment, maybe that's for the attorney. Again, I'm not an attorney, I'm a dentist, and I deal a lot with colors, so I'm really glad you struck out the thing with going with Sherwin-Williams and branding, but putting into a language branding of using a schleck, lax, that's narrowing this very finely for lax, which, because I actually looked into it, the original design is not available anymore. Then asking everybody to use one particular brand, maybe the language could be widen a little bit in this to include Schleck look like, similar to whatever, but not put one particular brand. Because you know what, I lock my door very quickly and I lock my Schleck commercial grade, locks kicks up within 30 seconds with the gun like this, gun track and he's in my office. Just a comment, not to...
Yeah, we stayed within the theme.
Right. Now, we're not saying you have to stick with Sherwin-Williams. You know, there's a Sherwin-Williams number.
Exactly, and that's very good.
You can go to, I think what we're saying now is you can go to
anybody,
provided they use the formula.
And that's perfect.
That is used by Sherwin-Williams.
Right.
Yes.
That's perfect.
That's what we're saying.
That's what I complimented,
right.
Going into this direction,
right.
Where my objection is putting into language one particular in 4.1, one particular maker of lacs, that there are the exclusive lacs to use within vineyards. I think that's too narrow.
When Mr. Palmer refers to the theme of the vineyards, one must question if this board even knows what the theme of your community really is. You just heard Mr. Palmer say they pushed the envelope a little bit. Boy, that's an understatement. Also, if you notice throughout the video, Mr. Victor seems to be a one-man show on almost all topics concerning this community. Then Dr. Nappy stands up again to inform the board that 720 statutes prohibit HOAs from creating rules and regulations that are more restrictive than the original covenants have already stipulated. He further warned the board that it would be a constitutional civil rights violation to have a rule that does not allow the right to appeal in order to exercise their constitutional rights of due process. He warned that this would open up this community to a plethora of expensive lawsuits if residents were stripped of this right. What this means is that if you put an application into the architectural committee for something that you want to do to your private property, and then the architectural review committee declines your application, you would not have the right to an appeal. This would be a death sentence, not just for your rights in the future, but also a devastating blow to your property values. It is an outrageous rule that is in contempt of the law. The community is not a sovereign country unto itself. It is a community that must follow the laws in the United States of America. Then Mr. Lee pipes in and begins to show his discriminating demeanor by labeling residents, certain residents that is, as the few, the vineyard friends, etc. Interestingly enough, Mr. Lee was appointed, not elected, after the last election, even though he did not show any interest in the election or applying to be elected. However, Ms. Hale, who did speak today within this meeting, which you saw, did run, and the community did vote for her in the election. And she should have been appointed per the voice of the community, but she was never considered by this board. The same goes for Dr. Nappy, who ran in the last election and per the voice of the community should have been appointed but was never considered also. Mr. Lee was chosen without regard for these facts by his friends on the board. Mr. Lee, shortly after appointment as a member, was quickly escalated to treasurer and unseated the standing treasurer only 1 week before the budget had to be submitted without any prior knowledge, presumably, of the community's financial status. Shortly after that, Mr. Lee votes as treasurer and signs off on the expenditure of a $10,000 pet project for his wife for flowers outside the front gates. Without regard of conflict of interest, seeing it was his wife's project and a non-essential expenditure, he should have recused himself from voting at all. But it did not stop there. And that $10,000 budget has now grown to over $15,000 or more. Additionally, it is very curious that the reserve study focused on Classical Court, the very cul-de-sac where Mr. Lee resides. Although there are drainage issues in multiple locations as stipulated in the original engineer's report conducted prior to the transition turnover from the developer. Now we should be at the conclusion of this meeting, thank God. It is up to the majority of this community to put a stop to this dictatorial decorum from this board. They have breached their pledges of almost everything they promised to get elected. In less than a year, they're taking power. They have divided this community beyond what the prior boards have already done. If you want a real premium community that prospers in the future, it is in your best interest not to sit idle and have your rights stripped away any further, have selective enforcement upon you, be intimidated by a board and their attorney if you want your voice heard, and to be excluded, discriminated, ignored, or be discredited by anyone on a board because you speak the truth. If you do not act now by participating and changing this disgraceful disposition of the board, then the fate of your investment may be jeopardized beyond repair after this next election in November. If anyone wants you to sign or hand over a blank proxy, you should refuse because it is likely your proxy will be given to Mr. Palmer's friends and not those you would have actually voted for. This was the case with 30-plus votes in the last election that allowed Secretary Victor and President Palmer to get elected by President Bill Parrish, who right after the election sold his house and left the community leaving this community holding the bag. Ask yourself this simple question. Is this the type of board you envisioned running your community when you purchased your home? If not, then change it for a new vision.
What with the site locks?
Yes.
The site locks are what the builder gave us, and then you were the original homeowner, you got to replace it for free. It was the reason that it was all kept the way it was. Sometimes they will give a new homeowner free locks. That's matches what you had. Sometimes. Depends on who you are and the person you talk to that day that will give you, because it has worked for other people that have bought the house secondhand. So that's the reason it was kept that way. This is a whole new process, you know, new roads. There's a lot of things going to be coming up down the road because our houses are getting older, and we realize that. And we're trying to address the bridges as we get to them. I know the lock sets have held up pretty well so far. I mean, I know if you're at 840, you don't get the sunlight that I get. My lock sets get destroyed every 4 years. So I get a serious sun on mine. My doors are a mess. But that's the reason we stay with that for now, because there's so much change going on already that they didn't want to get into too much other
I understand, but
things can get out of control because there are people who do like to do things without applying and not, you know.
That's okay, I'm just gonna switch it, but that's everybody to try before.
Right, but we're taking baby steps, and so far 3 things have looked like they've gotten changed so far. Previous boards wouldn't allow any changes at all. So I, as the yard chairman, I've pushed a lot of these things on the new board, and they've been kind of receptive after explanation. So it's baby steps. We're working on it. And we'll, you know, when the thing comes up, we address it. So, I mean, that's all I can tell you right now.
I appreciate going through the rules and regulations. I do think there should, the appeal to Pinnacle should remain in the agreement. It seems like there should be a due process if I do get one refusal. And that's what we do.
Okay, thank you. We can take that amendment.
We will.
We will, okay. Okay, I am going to make a motion to approve the amendments to the rules and regulations presented to the members, subject to the following 3 changes. The new exterior paint colors will include favorite tan, beach house, and Mexican sand.
What was the second one?
Favorite tan, beach house, and Mexican sand. We will remove sawdust and herbal wash. Under entrance doors on page 5, there is a typo. The option, the fiberglass free-hung door with impact glass insert with the option of clear glass, or the other type of glass is called granite glass. I make a motion, we approve the rules and regulations with those changes.
And how about that due process thing? Are you going to table that?
Yeah. Just so you all know, it's a little trickier than that because of the wording in your declaration, so it's not quite as easy from the appeal thing. So I'm going to discuss the option, what they are talking about, and we'll take it on advice.
Thank you.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Okay, Shelley, that has been approved,
It's been approved.
There's still stuff in there that you guys are going to approve that shouldn't be in there, that's in violation of state and city and county ordinances.
Does anybody else have anything to say according to the agenda? John?
Are you going to take the new revised rules and regulations and have the attorney review them and certify them that they are not in violation of county, city ordinances or any other issues? So once and for all, yes. No, correct?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.